Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our special Memorial Day edition of Richard French Live. I'm Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. A lot of families across our region, as well as across the country, of course, they have heavy hearts this Memorial Day. Many people paying tributes at parades and memorials to fallen soldiers. And over the course of the next hour, we will introduce you to some local military families. And we'll also take you to Dover Air Force Base, that in Delaware, where the bodies of our fallen heroes are reunited with their loved ones. We'll also visit West Point to tell you about a very special cadet who's getting a very special memorial in his name. But we begin this hour with the Vietnam War. 58,000 U.S. soldiers, of course, lost their lives there. Thousands of others who survived suffered injuries and illnesses from exposure to Agent Orange. That chemical defoliant, it has been linked to everything from cancer to heart disease to birth defects. Now, America is trying to make things right. Lawmakers in Washington, they're working on a bill that would help naval veterans who suffer from exposure but have been unable yet to get that help. And a short time ago, I spoke to Mike Lyons, a military analyst, retired captain in the U.S. Army, and a good friend to the program who served in Iraq. Mike, thank you very much for a few minutes. And I'll get into Memorial Day and the importance for you and guys who've worn the uniform. But when we hear about Agent Orange, we think of it as an issue of a bygone generation. And though it took a lot of work, we finally rectified it. You're here to tell us, for a portion of our military, we've made some progress, but there's a whole nother portion that are still looking for really care a generation later.
Yeah, there was tens of thousands of sailors that were part of what was called the Blue Water Navy. Not necessarily the ones that served on land inside of Vietnam itself. We're talking about the Vietnam era generation of vet. And these were the sailors that were on the ships 12 miles offshore in the Gulf of Tonkin, in the seas there, that had the residual effects of Agent Orange and how it was sprayed, and how that the dioxins got into the water, for example, that they were distilling in order to drink, and how it was aerosol borne. I mean, we flew these missions for over 10 years inside of Vietnam. Over 20 million gallons were spilled inside of there. And to your point, we thought, you would thought this problem was taken care of, but it's not. And that's why the Blue Water Navy Association is trying to get these benefits back and make sure that they get what they deserve.
If you could, Mike, put a face on this population. What kind of health problems have they had to live with? Yeah,
the people that are exposed to Agent Orange, first of all, have the highest exposure to cancer, all types of cancers within their system, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, as well as some Parkinson's disease, so things that affect the nervous system. They often not have affected them until later on in life, which is why it's happening right now. You know, the 18, 19, 20-year-old back in the 1960s now is in his, they're in their 60s, and now the effect of being exposed to those dioxins, even indirectly from an aerosol. A deckhand on an aircraft carrier that wipes down a plane that just came off of that Agent Orange mission, it was almost like these things that they didn't recognize how bad it was going to be.
Are we talking about a lot of guys here?
Yeah, tens of thousands, and the number is likely the hundreds of millions in order to take care of it. But I think we owe it as a country to these people. But it again gives the umbrella should they be exposed, should this come up. But unfortunately, we've also lost some sailors and airmen because of it. They're trying to now find out what the level of the Air Force problem would be, because again, the same thing, those Air Force crews were exposed from a residual effect to Agent Orange.
And more than bringing attention to the issue, there's some plans here to how to rectify it, right?
Yeah, there was. 1991, under George Bush, there was the Agent Orange Act that had covered all of the veterans. But for some reason in 2002, the Veterans Administration, and either a cost-cutting measure or something, decided to change that rule and only offer these benefits for those sailors, again, in the Brown Water Navy. Those were actually had boots on the ground inside of Vietnam. So for the past 12 years or so, they've been fighting to get this benefit back, and unfortunately, some of the sailors have died. Now, some politicians right now have been working on it. There's been, a few years ago, a bill came through Congress, but it died But now there's been hope that perhaps a bill will go through Congress to restore these benefits.
You think there's a will in D.C. to do this?
I know Senator Gillibrand in New York is focusing on it. Senator Steins in Montana on the Senate side. And then on the House, there was a bill as well. So the fact that there's two bills working through both of the houses, I think that there is. But again, you know, we've taken care of the post 9/11 generation vet, I think, and I think that we've done all we could. We're much more cognizant of the fact, and it is on the Vietnam veteran that we love our soldiers and our sailors, and we've learned on them. But we've got to really make sure that we cover this last base, so to speak. It was covered at some level, but we've got to cover this last base and make sure we take care of those Blue Water Navy veterans that were exposed to Agent Orange, so they're not getting the health care they need today.
Speaking of the day, we're going to have a lot of really moving stories remembering the fallen here, including soldiers coming back to Dover, and then soldiers that posthumously are finally being awarded the recognition they deserve, and even the words of Abraham Lincoln after those 3 horrible days in Gettysburg. To that end, it must carry a special meaning for you. You've known, obviously, you've worn the uniform yourself. You've seen young men come through the academies. Talk about why today, it's not just a 3-day weekend, but today's so much more. Yeah,
it's the kind of day where as a veteran you sit there and you really hope you never go to war again. You hope your children never go to war again. I know we've talked, I don't want my children to go, I don't want your children to go. Anyone that's been exposed to what goes on in a combat zone wouldn't want to have anybody else experience that. But then you think of the people that made the ultimate sacrifice, and you have to remember them in the hope that we just don't make some of the same mistakes that we make again, and history's got to learn from that. And even under what were the best intentions in some ways, that some ways people laid down their life. I know I've spent time in the cemetery at West Point, for example, walking around. I've got classmates there, former instructors, and there's famous people that are buried there that all obviously made the contribution, and in some cases, again, made the ultimate sacrifice in a combat zone. You
mentioned the West Point Cemetery. It's one of the most humbling places, and I've also had the privilege of going back with vets who served at Omaha and Utah Beach in Normandy. It's the most beautiful piece of land, the most solemn, hollow, and perfect symmetrical lines, the crosses, the Stars of David for the soldiers who died that day. It gives you perspective, but we're in such troubling times, Mike, where every leader, forget the politics of it, in this changing world, what are our fights that are worth dying for, which aren't? What is the definition of an end of mission? What isn't? It's not nation states anymore. It's as complicated, I think, as in recent memory here. I mean, you got to go back generations ago to figure out where are those lines that are worth it or not. And I don't see that changing, do you?
Yeah, Rich, you're right. There's got to be a demand for an explanation when we get involved and decide to put people in harm's way. I mean, the mission we had the other day, for example, in Syria, I know it went well, but that could have gone very badly. I mean, the fact that we can't get a resolution from Congress on a force authorization right now, it's almost like they want to bail out of it. The soldier on the ground wants the American people to support them. They're willing to fight and die for their country and the like. And if they don't, if that's missing, that's a key component to what makes them tick. But I do think that, to your point, we've got to very well define what these national security interests are. You look at the cemeteries in Gettysburg and in Normandy Beach and in Arlington and the different sections. And Monday is going to be a very tough day for family members that'll go to different sections, Section 63, and again, the post 9/11 generation of a veteran, and same thing at West Point. It is the time where you do remember, and we'll never forget. I'm confident that won't happen. But again, it'll be a tough day for a lot of people today.
And as tough as it is, there's one thing I think America deserves some credit for, and unfortunately it was on the backs of the Vietnam vets. People may not love the war, but you love the soldier. And I think as a country we've become much better at that here, especially recognizing unbelievable men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice. But Mike, as always, thank you. Thank you also for your service. Up next, we will visit a local military family with a fascinating story. Please stay tuned for more of a Memorial Day special.